Well, hello there, gentlemen. How are we doing today?
Hello.
Doing good. Doing good. Ready for next week.
The flat earthers. That's right. Next Monday we're doing flat Earth, and we're gonna have a lot of fun with that one because there will be a brand new Starship launch for us to take a look at the video of. That's what I want to do.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah. But that is not today. Today, I want to talk a bit about the keys to the future. So, I've dominated the ETNs for the past couple weeks, and I swear I will get off of your guys' screens and stop talking about boring, dry stuff because that's what we talk about here. Um, but so if the show I did 2 weeks ago or led 2 weeks ago, that was kind of about the past. Then last week was about kind of about the present, choice. Every choice you make is always made in the present. You have choices you have made and you have choices you will make, but when you're making a choice, you're making it in the present. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the future, and by a little bit I mean a lot. Uh, but to do that, I need to go back to the past a little bit because what we're talking about today begins in the 60s and the 70s. And
are you doing Marty McFly with it on us?
yeah, we have to go. Yeah, we have to go back to the future. Um, but sort of the idea that possessed the Western culture in the 60s was this idea that the human mind could be perfected. And you heard my dad talk about a little bit about that in the episode 2 weeks ago. I'm not going to talk too much about why and all the culture that was going on at the time, but the key point is that you have to understand about everything that's going on today is a result of this idea that we could use science and technology to perfect the human mind. But this creates a bit of a problem. Those damned Christians.
well, we also could perfect society.
Yep.
Um, just as a simple analogy, a war on poverty. We
Yep.
can erase poverty. But okay, so we were trying to perfect something. What did Jesus say?
Uh, the poor you will always have with you.
Okay,
So you're saying we can't perfect the poor? We can't perfect the
No,
homeless?
well, it's just look at everything around you. All these programs to perfect the family, perfect society, correct poverty. Everything's more, well, not every, well, the nuclear family, the basic structure of society is in disarray. It's in more and more chaos, more degeneracy, more single mommies, fatherless homes, more criminals, so on and so forth.
Right. So all these programs to perfect society, and what have they done? Destroyed society.
essentially.
So
So is it the same thing with the mind? All this effort to perfect the mind is the modern mind less educated, less literate, less
mm,
enumerate, more solipsistic,
and
uh,
sophistic.
sophistic. Are people generally shallow thinking? The masses, I mean, the average populace, they're kind of shallow thinkers.
Well, turns out there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is in order for this is particularly on the boomers, although we'll get into Xers in a bit here. They had to adopt they adopted three distinct philosophies to do this. And I did say that we're going to talk philosophy. But I want to point out here that I'm an engineer. I am not interested in talking philosophy for the sake of philosophy. My interest in philosophy, hi Nick. My interest in philosophy is its practical applications to the society we live in. And there are practical applications of it. So if you think that I'm going to get into some philosophical debate over these about, why I'm wrong about this or that, I'm not interested in the philosophy as written by the person. I'm interested in how it's applied to today's society. So those three philosophies were structuralism, Gramscianism, so that'd be Antonio Gramsci, and Nietzscheanism. Of course, most people here do know Friedrich Nietzsche, and we're going to get into that. But I'm going to give some quick definitions here. Structuralism, specifically post-structuralism, is a philosophy that questions the objectivity or stability of various interpretive structures that are posited by structuralism and considers them to be constituted by broader systems of power. Okay. So when they talk about interpretive structures, what they're really talking about is language and the malleability of language.
Are you talking about like Wittgensteinianism?
That's one aspect of it. But
Okay. Okay.
so Gramscianism is the philosophy of cultural hegemony. Okay. So this he describes how,
Do people even know what hegemony is?
Okay, well, I can define it because I had to read it for this episode. It's a domination of the state through through non-military force. So that's about as far as I'll go with that one. There's a lot more to it. But Gramsci describes how the state and the ruling capitalist class, he's a Marxist, guys. The bourgeoisie use cultural institutions to maintain their wealth and power. But he drew a lot of his insights from beyond the Marxists. He was a big fan of Machiavelli, for example. And there's evidence, but not strong evidence, that he was familiar with the works of Nietzsche. Nietzsche had died by the time he was doing his stuff. So Nietzscheanism is the philosophy of Nietzsche. Now, there's a fun little fact, and I've talked with multiple philosophers. These are guys who actually went to school for philosophy. As best we can tell, Nietzscheanism is not actually a coherent philosophy. And I know this is going to piss people off. He had lots of opinions about his observations, but they don't really form into a coherent philosophy. And to date, no philosopher since has been able to elucidate a coherent philosophy out of his work. Many have tried. Many. And these are highly intelligent men. No one's been able to do it. Now, what ended up happening in the 1960s is neither Gramscianism nor Nietzscheanism provide a generative theory or framework for the transhumanist belief that you can perfect the human mind. So they had to graft structuralism onto both of them. So you have Gramscian structuralism and you have Nietzschean structuralism, or specifically of the French variety. So if you probably heard these names before. The problem is, so Gramscianism has none of the transhumanism in it. It predates pretty much all of that. Gramscianism is mostly concerned about, government and colleges and, institutions of culture. So it's insufficient to describe the transhumanism that possessed the ideology of the 60s and 70s, the boomers. Nietzscheanism, being an incomplete philosophy, just needs something. And the benefit that structuralism, and particularly post-structuralism, provide to Nietzsche is that it slots well with Nietzsche's concept of perspectivism. Now, perspectivism is a word that you guys probably aren't familiar with, but you might be familiar with this other term, my truth.
Yeah, subjectivism.
Right. Perspectivism is a form of subjectivism. It basically says that my perspective is mine and therefore it's my truth. Because if there is no and Nietzsche actually very specifically rejects the concept of objective truth.
Subjectively.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Nietzsche's all over the place, guys. It's a hard thing to read. which ironically means that most people who read it, they kind of tend to just read the bits that they like and then they stop. So
We see this. We see perspectivism all the time. Women
Yes, we
use
do.
it in particular. A guy will bring up make some general statement. Could actually be a stereotype, which is a generalization. And she'll say, well, we can't know that. From my perspective, it's this way. And what about this exception? So by coming up with an exception, you can throw out the whole generalization, and then you can't know anything about that. So therefore, you can make up whatever you want because it's my truth from my perspective.
Or NAWAL.
A bit. So perspectivism just cannot lead to any consensus because no consensus is possible because everybody is expected to view that thing from their own perspective and not consider anybody else's perspective.
Well, this makes total sense from the Nietzschean perspective. If the will to, or the Nietzschean philosophy, if the will to power is the ultimate, force of humanity, then of course my perspective is the only one that matters. It has to be. It's the only way I can exercise my power is through my own perspective.
Right. And if my power is greater than your power, then I win. Then your perspective doesn't matter. And I've proved my perspective to be the correct one.
Does this sound like the modern left? And we'll get into the right later, but does this sound like the modern
Sounds
left
very
at all?
Foucault like.
It's
Sounds like
incredibly
Foucault.
Foucault.